Boss and I chatted about this early in the week about what we thought your expectations would be for this forum. And so we want a little bit more depth, both when we go down the line and who's going to be making comments. We've got the slut, we've got the solos, we've got Mo, we've got M1. And basically what I've asked them to do is give a little bit of a personal side of the challenges that maybe their position, them in the leadership position, had making this transition. And then also some of the technical side, whether it be things that are still hanging out there that they haven't resolved yet, or issues that they've already worked through, but some of the technical parts of even the maneuvers, the challenges that they found, or with the transition with Bert. And specifically even with Mo, one of the things I really asked him to address is the challenges of getting the right crew members in now, the troops, how this has affected the senior leadership among the enlisted troops. So that aspect of what many of us never think about, other than the bosses probably in the group, of how hard it was to get everybody, all the maintainers, in position at the same time. So we're going to start out with a quick video, and then we'll get it going. So roll it if you would. Don't you love the paint job on Bert? That is awesome. Two quick ones, and I'm going to turn it over to the boss. First of all, thank you guys. on Friday, last weekend of the season, adding to your morning, y'all coming all the way out here. I don't have an idea what time you got up and knowing what is ahead of you the rest of the day, to include finishing up at your house tonight, boss. Thank y'all for making time to come out here today. We greatly appreciate it. Means a lot. And the last thing, and this is on a segue right into boss, I asked him we cannot capture all that went in to this transition today. This did not happen in 1 year, as Boss Root and our team went through, and many of the other teams through the transition. This did not happen in a 12-month or even an 18-month period. This is a 5-year evolution. And there are many people who were on the team before, who had left, who contributed to this, going to Pax River, doing profiles, taking advantage really to where modeling and simulation, the things that allows us to do to learn those hard lessons about what the plane can't and can't do. But we really do have to, I wish we had a comprehensive list of all those people. But I mean, we had people on terminal leave that were already out flying for airlines, and we got special dispensations for them to continue going to Pax River and do some testing for us. From Del Bull standing up, 4 or 5 years ago and into the season, said, yeah, we're making the transition next year. Well, here we are. So, but the bottom line is, I think this transition was done right. It was done methodically, and the Department of Navy and all of the people involved, I think we're able to give the right tools to this team, not only for the demo, but for Bert, for getting the J model in. I mean, it's been impressive to see a system that actually worked. So with that in mind, I asked Boss if he can, as much as you can, give a synopsis of it, maybe a little bit more in depth about all that went on with the lead up to when they showed up with blue airplanes on the ramp. Boss, over to you, sir.
All right, thanks, sir. Appreciate that. First off, thanks to the BAA for hosting this event. This is awesome. And hopefully this is going to give you some insight to what we did out there. And we'll get a little level of detail for you. If it's too much detail, then we'll take a look at the crowd and, too much detail. Got it. But at the end of the day, no doubt, Admiral, I'll tell you, it's taken a 5-year process. There's been a lot of folks involved in this. We've had a great support all the way up, both Navy and Marine Corps side, highest levels of leadership. And I can tell you it's just some wave top view. We focus on the aircraft, but some of the most important battles that we had on this was the increase in the manning required to maintain our Super Hornet as well as the Super Hercules. There's just, and the Navy and Marine Corps, we're still fighting some battles there, but for the most part, we're looking pretty good. And that was what enabled us to actually do this transition from the get-go. You have to go to our international partners to go back, and M1 will talk a little bit more about that, how we got Bert over here, and that kind of long process over from the UK to get over back to here in the middle of a COVID environment. So we definitely had support from NAVAIR throughout this entire time. The PMOs, our PMAs, the senior leadership throughout this entire process has been, what do you need to do this safely? What do you need to get this mission done? I don't think there's anything else this team could have asked for their support. We ran into challenges. You'll hear a couple of those challenges, specifically probably on the maintenance side. We'll run into some challenges on the flight characteristics side, and you'll hear guys as they talk through whether it be from 4, 5, and 6 on what they saw on the aircraft. Mechanics-wise, it was different, or some things they had to unlearn from the Hornet, so stay tuned for some of that. But throughout this entire process, we've had also fantastic support from Boeing. We had their chief test pilot, Sting Wallace, which a few guys know, basically embedded with us during winter training to help us through some of those lessons learned. We wanted to make sure we didn't relearn lessons that existed inside of the test community, because we as a Navy have been flying the Super Hornet for a long time, as well as the Super Hercules. We engaged Lockheed Martin, who's helped us a ton to get to where we can actually demo them. Again, I'm going to defer to Mo and M1 on that, but talk about a battle to be able to get back to doing demo in Fat Albert. So stay tuned for that one. That was a battle there, but we can now effectively, we got funding for that, a new wing box. What that means is basically we're going to have demo in this Fat Albert indefinitely, right, for like decades. So we basically, they pointed up some money and allowed a wing box, and again, if you go in there, and we're gonna have Bert demos from it. It took us a while to get there, so we could properly track it and manage its live. So again, we went out and we've probably the most important resource we had through the entire process was the X network. We went back to all the jet transitions I was reading after actions on the F11 to F4, and took that from day one. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly to this group, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, and we found a lot of parallels. We were working hand in hand with the 87 team, really getting lessons out of that, and found that we probably should even talk more. I think we had an epiphany at the end of winter training. We went back and saw one of your videos. I think you did out in Fort Worth. And as you were talking about some of the experimental maneuvers you were trying, and like, oh, this doesn't really work. And we kind of looked at ourselves and went, yeah, well, shoot, we probably should ask these guys, because it sounds like it doesn't work in Super Hornet either. So, but stay tuned for some of that. So huge thanks. What we did after a COVID year was we froze the team. We froze the team also for the transition, because we wanted to, just like 86 to 87, maximize the level of experience that we had on our team to be able to steepen that learning curve and to get to safe as rapidly as possible. That's what the Blue Angels are about, right? In winter training is getting from fleet aviator to safe as fast as we can. Then we'll worry about the altitudes. Then we'll worry about getting close. We'll work about integrating new maneuvers from there. But that was our goal for this season, and that was very much in line with the 87 team's mentality of, hey, we're going to learn the old demo. We're going to do it safely. We may not be setting any records on closeness or low altitudes, but we're going to go out there and we're going to get the Blue Angel transition complete and safely. And we'll let the next 34 years, like we did in the Hornet, we'll continue to refine that demonstration just like every team did before us. So without, that's all I'm going to get into for right now. I'm going to kick it over to each position to kind of give an overview of some of the challenges as well as some of the differences that you might be interested in the aircraft. Tootsie.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Jim Tootsie Cox, current number 4 slot pilot for the team. And our primary goal when we sat down after we made the determination that we were going to freeze the team for this year was initially not changing a thing. As several of you know, we reached back, I reached back, Deuce reached back to several X's, generations past, and said, hey, how did transitions go for you guys? What were some of the successes? What were some of the failures that you had? And ultimately, like, what led to the execution of a safe year? And the overwhelming majority of that feedback was simply do what you know, right? So from a training perspective, we designed the training program, kind of worked hand in hand with Deuce to essentially do the exact same training program here in Pensacola that we did with the Charlie back in 2019 and 2020. So all of the maneuvers that we trained a new 23 with, we did again in the Super Hornet, just to be able to have that continuity to pass down to next teams, and then also just test the airplanes ourselves. We had the privilege of having the transition team, which most of you, if not all of you, are aware of, which gave us an incredible product to go forth with. They had tested the demo for several months prior to handing the jets over to us. So what we were able to do is we started from the winter training perspective. So the Diamond Dirty Clean Flat Pass with afterburner drills times X out in the airspace. And what we started to find was that there are subtle differences in the flight control systems. There are differences in the speed brakes. There are differences in the way that we were conducting our loops and or rolls that we had to modify just a little bit, because we tried to recreate the exact same thing with this airplane from a profile perspective. So angle of bank, air speeds, profile, everything about it. But we found that it just wasn't the same. Same angle of bank, same air speeds would ultimately lead to tighter turn radius, and we couldn't figure out why. So we kind of modified the profiles here and there to make it better to follow, and then a better looking demo. So once we did that, we were able to then take that out to El Centro, where we were. Our ultimate goal again was to do the F-18 Alpha through Delta demo safely within the first half or so of El Centro, prior to potentially trying a new maneuver. So as most of you are aware, we added a couple things this year. The biggest one being the changeover roll, which was kind of been intertwined with the left echelon roll. Again, Diamond specific here over the past several decades. And this year, kind of resurrected the changeover roll, which was something that we as a team voted on. We decided on that, hey, this is going to be something cool that we can try for the 75th anniversary. Kind of a tip of the hat to those who have come before us, and then something that they can reflect on next year and determine if that's what they want to do, or bring back the left echelon roll itself. So we were able to do that, though, after we had proven to ourselves that we could fly this jet safely, doing the demo as we knew it. And then from the training perspective there, we, like the boss mentioned, we started with the farthest bearing lines at the highest altitudes. With our experience on the team, we felt no pressure whatsoever to take it lower or take it tighter. at all. So we started far and pretty high, and slowly worked our way in throughout the year, ultimately getting to a point where we are flying in our tighter sets that you'll see hopefully today and tomorrow, on not an earlier timeline than you would in any other year. So the Diamond 360 set being the tightest one there, we didn't hurry that one up at all either. It's the Pensacola Beach timeframe, maybe a month or so ahead of schedule, but we just wanted to do it all the same to be able to prioritize safety and make sure that we weren't really missing anything there. So that's all I've got from the training perspective. Baxter, over to you.
Thanks, Chief. So for our road here, as far as two solos, brought Chewy along here to kind of talk about more specifics of Hornet to Super Hornet right away, because I had about a 10-year period in between flying the Hornet to demo and then coming back to be the Super Hornet this year. So from our perspective, first operationally, it did change things a little bit. We're kind of learning through that a little bit, and Mo will kind of touch point on that as far as how it has changed us operationally, being able to space our things out, and then some of the challenges we saw on the maintenance side that actually affected operations and kind of the support manual type of thing for all the 78 folks in here. Because it does affect kind of how when we go to an air show, we learn those lessons throughout, how wide of a taxiway do we need, when can we do 45s, 90s, and all that stuff. What kind of support equipment do we need and all that. That did change a little bit, and we're still updating that for next year as well. So there are some changes with that. As far as demo flying, I'll kind of keep it simple there. We did try some things. It's funny, we kind of looked at it from the solo perspective as being, quote unquote, max performance demonstrators. All right, what can the Super Hornet give us that the Hornet could not? Right? They're pretty darn close to each other. We went down to Pax River back in December, talked to the engineers, and unfortunately when we talked to engineers, they don't quite understand what we're trying to get at. Luckily we had Sting Wallace there to kind of translate for us, and Walleye and I had talked to him years ago when I was on team before. We changed the MRT out and had him come out and kind of do some testing with us in El Centro, and that's where that relationship really started back then. And we brought him back in this year to kind of go over some stuff, whether it's departure resistance and high alpha stuff, pirouette out logic, stuff like that. And we brought him in to do that. So that's kind of where the solo perspective looked at it and went, all right, what can we do to maybe improve the show? First thing that Chewy and I got together, we're like, hey, we're going to keep the solo demo as it is. If there's something we can throw in there once we have that down, we will. We also kind of had a different challenge as far as some of the other folks, because you had a new number 5 coming back. And then he had already been trained by 2 other number 5s. This is the 3rd number 5 he's been trained at, so I think we broke that record this year, along with being the oldest solo pilot out there. So with that, we had some small challenges just getting used to each other, flying around, because it's kind of a bond, as anyone knows here, when you go through that program. But with that, we kind of brought our heads together, and I believe it's the same thing that the 87 team talking to Leroy about. We're trying to do a square loop. So we tried that for a little while. That was really only the big difference. There are little subtle differences as far as on the high alpha pass. You can't do it as low as the Hornet, because believe it or not, if you lose an engine in the Super Hornet, it tends to depart quicker. As far as you lose more altitude, you try to save it in the 250 feet. We could in the Hornet. Now we have to back up at 500 feet if we want to fly the same profile. If we want to fly lighter alpha, you can go lower, but then you're kind of balancing what kind of show do you want to give there. So that had to come up on that, and that was done through some great work from Walleye and the transition team, trying to figure out, hey, what can this jet do? What can it not do? Going back into the kind of what profiles can the solos do, we looked at some of the other logic that was improved on the Super Hornet from the Hornet from a fleet perspective, whether it's a turbo nose low, whether it's the Hyber, or kind of the nose authority is a little bit better. The pirouette logic is the same for all the Hornet pilots out there. Basically getting it to rotate really around a different axis and what it looks like to the crowd, right? Because at the end of the day, we're here to please the crowd and make them go ooh and ah and see how we do business and hopefully recruit the next generation of naval aviators, right? So when we went into that, we did some testing in the simulator. Great work. We started going to the Pax River simulator because it has more fidelity than it does in Oceana or Lemoore as far as the simulators there. So we went in there and we did a lot of work on. We were able to get, basically, they can record the profile, and the big thing for us was engine failures, flight control problems, leading edge failures, stuff like that would really affect you in a solo profile. And we tested that for a couple days up there. I went early the moment I got the call, hey, you're coming back. Walleye and I went up there about a month later and spent a few days up there going through some of the profiles. And the great thing is they were able to record profiles so we could actually fly off of each other. Now, granted, it's in a simulator, so it's not really like the real thing as far as your depth and control and all that, but we were able to go do that and go through all the failures, whether it was in the MRT, leading edge failure. How does it do it in the Hornet? or Super Hornet vice the Hornet, and then also, do we have to adjust any of the procedures, right? So any kind of single engine wave off in a high alpha regime, I'm doing the MRT out from the pirouette logic. How do I get out of that if I have a stab lockout or something like that? The great thing is the Super Hornet's a very reliable airplane, and if you lose any services, it helps you out a lot. The biggest problem you're going to have in the Super Hornet is the engine failures. If you lose an engine, the adverse thrust and yaw you get there, yaw, is going to be the one thing that's going to make you depart. So that kind of, we looked at a couple maneuvers, so just real quick, the square loop, so instead of the vertical pitch, we come in, basically go up 65 degrees nose high, then come around for a half cube or a split S on the backside there. We tried to do a square loop, so opposing square loops, we kind of looked at that, we went into it, but at the end of the day, it just came down to safety, and it also came down to what's it look like from the crowd in order to match it. So you look up there and see two smoke trails of two squares going at it. It just didn't have the look that we were looking for, and then we incorporated a lot of our sport officers, even had the BERT guys out there. Hey, tell us what it looks like, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to please, right? We can be in there in 5 and 6, be like, oh, we love this maneuver, but it doesn't look good to them. Why do it, right? So we came down and we basically went out there one day. We did a hybrid of the two. We did the full square loops, and then we did the old vertical pitch, and they came back, and every time, like, the vertical pitch is much better just because it brings the energy to the ground. The other one's very slow. You had to go up slower, come down slower. Oh, by the way, the safety margin of it was very low because of the fact that at 2,000 feet, you had to start your pull out, and I can't tell if he's at 1,800 feet or 2,200 feet. I can only tell if he's on the horizon. Oh, by the way, the comm cart, our safety backup, didn't know 1,500 feet from 2,500 feet from 2,000 feet to give that safety call for them to execute the recovery. So we kind of ixnayed that, and I was talking to Leroy, and he's like, yeah, we tried the same thing 20-some years ago. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So lessons learned, like Boss said. But and then the other one was on the MRT. It's basically the same thing. We fly at more of an alpha number, though, because truly an MRT is based off of the alpha, and that's kind of the research we got back from the test guys. So on the out of it, we were going to do, I don't know if everyone's seen the single ship demo. It's basically what they call a loaded roll. And what that is basically you come out of the MRT and do the pirouette to go about 6 degrees nose high. And then as you're going up, you kind of roll, and it looks like the airplane's rolling around the nose. It's a really cool looking maneuver. I have a video of it, but at the end of the day, we did it a few times, and Sting Wallace and the folks at NavAir kind of got really nervous about engine failures and departure. So we kind of just went with, hey, let's just do what we know works best. We'll incorporate a turbo nose down logic. So that logic basically says below 200 knots in the aircraft, you go full nose forward, and the speed brakes come out, and the flight controls do something. I couldn't quite translate it properly from the engineers. But essentially, the nose turbo, nose low, but it's not a negative G, it's like a 0 G, and the airplane just looks like it's kind of rising and the nose is coming down. So it's a pretty cool look, got some good feedback on it. At the end of the day, it's a much safer maneuver than doing the loaded roll on it. But over to the team, as we get more experience with the Super Hornet and get more comfortable with it, potentially seeing that down the road. So that was mainly the big things we looked at as far as, hey, how can we showcase what the Super Hornet can do vice the Hornet on a purely flight demonstration profile, right? So we noticed some things a little bit different with just how the aircraft fly. They're much more sensitive than the old Hornets were as far as rolling the aircraft, knife edges and all that stuff, as far as you would think that, hey, the flight controls are flight controls are flight controls, and in the Hornet you would do a certain position on your knee every time you roll it. This jet is not like that at all. It depends on which unit your number in, how far through the roll you are, and stuff like that, depending on which unit number you're in, which is quite interesting and frustrating at first till you start learning all the unit numbers, and you can actually fly them through there. And the only dangerous part about that is, so the logic on the Super Hornet is the moment you get a negative alpha, so you basically, you would be pushing out or anything like that, it slows about a quarter of the roll rate. So that was something that some of the aircraft is, when you start to roll, you kind of have to breathe a little half stick or pull a little half stick in order to get it to keep going. Otherwise, I think Chewie learned that lesson yesterday as he's starting to fly the two-seater a little bit, is the moment you roll, it'll blatantly slow down on tape, and it just, the last quarter of the roll just goes to that quarter of a roll, and you'll see it. But that's something that you get used to it. You just get used to this. And this is the kind of stuff that gets passed down for solo pilots next year, you and Julius. He knows about it, and kind of same thing for the DAR, for the Diamond there. I'll turn it over to Chewie to kind of talk more specifics of, like, hey, what was it like to go from the Hornet to the Super Hornet? As I had a 10-year gap, so I don't really know. I'm old, my memory's not that great. So, but over to you, Chewie, to kind of talk those specifics.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant Commander Kerry Chewie Rickoff. Nice to meet you guys. As he mentioned, posing solo for last year and this year, or part of this year at least. That's a whole other story. But getting back into the transition was very unique for me. I was lucky enough to be the first active 2020 team member to go through the Rhino transition, even while we were still flying the Hornets. So I was the first one to get in there and actually start flying a little bit with the transition team. While they were doing their thing, they had, three of them, Boss Doyle, Walleye, and then Bug Rub, for those of you guys who don't know. So now that I have all the minds in here to actually submit this into history and make sure that the video gets it. The first time we got 4 Blue Angel jets up there, the slot was flown by the opposing solo. So that's my claim to fame. I want to make sure I get that to Tootsie one last time. But yeah, so, it was very cool for me to get to do a couple of flights with them prior to Baxter getting down here and then us starting the solo stuff. But as he mentioned, for the luck of us, the difference between the Hornet and the Super Hornet was not very drastic in the solo profile. You get a lot more power, a little more nose authority. We don't bleed as much, so it keeps some of our clears a little bit more energized. But the things we really found were just minute mechanic differences. For those solos, the guys who rolled the jet, you remember in the Hornet, you had to find that 0G roll spot on your leg, or the jet would just kind of start to decouple and depart and have those real loose rolls. Luckily, we don't see that in the Super Hornet. The only thing we see, which Baxter mentioned, was it'll affect your roll rate. So if you don't get the right spot, it's still going to roll, and it'll keep a tight roll, but it'll just roll slower. So we had to change a little bit of that, and a little bit of counterintuitive things, kind of as Boss mentioned on some of their loops, they're changing profiles there. As they found out on the double farble, when we roll this thing inverted, you almost have to put the stick in the far upper corner, which is super counterintuitive. You're going to do that, your quick yug, and then put the stick full forward and left to get it to roll real snappy inverted. So we found that out. There's a different roll mech for a knife edge inverted than there is for a continuous roll. A continuous roll, you go a little bit more aft. So those are the kind of things we found out as we were getting new in the Super Hornet and running them up and down the beach here, and then getting it back in the demo. And luckily we had the transition team to kind of warn us about that stuff and then put it into practice last year. The only other thing I can think of really, and back me if I'm forgetting something, but the inverted flight is a little bit trickier in the Super Hornet, which we were finding. I would find it on my takeoff Immelman. So the new takeoff for 6 is accelerate, low transition, Immelman up, and then stay inverted for 30 seconds, which we can do now with a mixture of afterburner and mill power to stay inverted there. And I was finding every time, right at about 217 knots, I kept saying, I was like, there's something weird with the flight controls where it's not reacting to a full forward stick, and at 217 it kicks in. And we were talking with Sting out in El Centro. He's like, yeah, it shouldn't be. We don't know why. And they go back to the engineers. And then they found out, like, oh, yeah, we never designed the plane to have full forward stick authority at that slow speed because we never expected anyone to be there. And he's like, but at 217 knots, the flight control should clean up. I was like, yeah, that's what I keep saying. 217 is where it fixes itself. So we had a few little hiccups like that, but turned out that to be a very, very smooth transition. A lot of that help was, as everyone's mentioned, the simulator guys, the Pax River guys, and having our own dedicated transition team to throw us in there. But like I said, luckily my part's short. There's not a whole lot of differences. Any other questions, though, we'll get to attack. I'll pass you guys on to Bert and let you see how the Super Hercules is.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Major Rick Rose, call sign Turbo. A lot went on the past couple years with Fat Albert. And I'll first start off by saying, I was a lucky guy, impeccable timing, picking up the keys for this aircraft and getting to go bring it back to Pensacola. But this spans well over a decade. I can dig through my desk right now and find some briefs titled the 2010J Transition Brief. And so there's a lot of work involved. To name a few, like Eddie George, AJ Harrell, Russ Campbell, those guys really set the groundwork to get this aircraft. So I was the lucky guy that got to go pick it up. But starting off, we had to get creative. The Marine Corps is such a critical asset in the Marine Corps. We could not afford to get a J model off the line. They just weren't willing to give us an aircraft fresh off the line, so we had to get creative there because the Marine Corps just needs it. They're still doing their J model transition in the fleet. So looking around, England they're going all in on the A400, the Airbus. So they're mothballing all their C-130Js right now. And, someone out there raised their hand. Like, we'll take one of those. So not a new J. It's been, I think, a 2000, 2001 J model, one of the first off the lines. So they were able to allocate funding for that, and like I said, all the process going into that and making sure that that this was possible. Once we got the word that this is going to happen, we started planning on how we're going to pick this up and when. So go to 2020, pandemic hits. So at the height of the pandemic, we faced a few challenges there, but got flown out to go pick up the new bird. And so a little bit of a drawn out process based on, you know, all the COVID considerations, a few delays here and there, but still the smoothest pickup I've ever experienced picking up a plane out of heavy level depot maintenance. So they put their heart and soul in this aircraft, painting it and making sure it was ready for pickup once I arrived. And the first time I saw it, they pulled out of the hangar, it was all painted up. Beautiful aircraft, awesome to see that. So I had a nice little trip planned out for the way home before the pandemic hit, with a couple down days in Iceland and in St. John's, Canada. So that got thrown out the window. But turns out boss found out we have an 18-hour crew day, and we did a couple gas and goes out of Iceland. So we went to Keflavik gas, go to actually Bangor, Maine for another gas and go to Clear Customs, and then a little divert into Boston for a maintenance issue, and then out to Fort Worth to complete our maintenance inspections. So that's kind of how the pickup went down. Very smooth. The plane is the cleanest Hercules I've ever flown maintenance-wise, and that's a testament to this guy and his crew making sure this aircraft is up and ready to go. So my goal, primary mission for me, was to make sure this aircraft, we hit the ground running and support the team with our primary mission with logistics support. That's it. I wanted to make sure that we prove our worth immediately. And we did, and we supported the team near 100% readiness rate up until this last week. We finally had to swap a motor out, but made it every single show and supported this season without fail. And I was really proud of that and my crew. But so that was primary mission one. And then the demo was another challenge. So as expected, Big Navy, Big Marine Corps, and the engineers at Matter were a little bit sensitive to us flying demonstration of this aircraft. So we had to, a lot of conversations, countless hours on the phone, conference calls with engineers, trying to figure out how can we still have this aircraft in the show without overflying it. And like I said, it's not a brand new C-130J, it's got some hours on it, and the limiting factor is the center wing box, which, you know, that's where the wings are attached, the fuselage is attached, the landing gear goes into, so that takes the brunt of the stress of the aircraft. That's the limiting factor for this airframe. And so we had to figure out a way to where we don't overfly the center wing box and still can fly a demonstration. So there's two things we needed to make sure was going to happen before we started flying demonstration. That was one, get funding for a new center wing box, and then two, figure out the severity factor. The engineers were slapping a 25-to-1 severity factor for every hour demo. Essentially, they're adding 25 hours to the airframe. And a little bit shocking for me because a lot of people don't understand how we fly these planes in the Marine Corps fleet. We definitely max perform these C-130s in the Marines and use it for every and all missions that you can think of. So a little bit surprising to me, but the difference with the J model, one of the main big differences is the sensor data now we can download. There's over 20 sensors throughout the aircraft. We can download it. We can manage the fleet in a smart and efficient manner and kind of show the engineers, hey, like, it's not as bad as you think, kind of thing. So we flew a couple demonstration profiles. We got cleared to do up to 10 just for data capture purposes. I did a lot of work with Lockheed Martin and their test pilot, Stephen Knobloch, the guy that actually looped the C-130J. So I think it's a new maneuver we might be adding soon. I won't be doing it, but boss just okayed it. So we worked with him a lot, and he had a lot of great input for us, basically told us our demo is boring because we're not looping it. But so a lot of great data from him to kind of provide the engineers, say, hey, is this manageable? Can we basically take the data month to month and manage it out from there? We got the okay from them. We got their blessing. So a couple lessons learned I'll go into. I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes with some lessons learned. But the J model, the prop alone, the Dowdy prop, adds about 20% more thrust. Just the prop. The engines are more efficient. You have Rolls-Royce AE 2100 Delta engines. You'll hear it's a different noise. It's a much quieter aircraft than the old T model once you hear it fly over today. But a lot more power, and we learned some lessons. There's probably some, well, initially you would set takeoff power and still be able to hold brakes. You can no longer do that in this aircraft, we come to find. You'll see some skid marks out in Beaufort somewhere. The plane will start dragging the tires because it just wants to go. the takeoff distance is much shorter. It gets up to acceleration much faster. And so we'll rotate in less than 1,000 feet, and then our low transition doesn't last long before we got to start pulling before we overspeed the gear. Because the gear, it takes a while to get up. And we can match the JADO profile, obviously without the bottles, with this increased thrust and power. So it doesn't want to slow down is another thing. So the old T model props, as you can tell, is a lot of surface area. You pull that to flat idle, it's like a paddle out there. It's going to slow the plane down. The J model can't really do that. The surface area is in there and doesn't go full flat once you pull it to flat idle. So with that, it doesn't like to slow down, especially for the push to land. So when we're doing 25 degrees nose down, the airspeed's ticking right up, and we're trying not to overspeed the flaps at that point. But and then also with the high performance climb, like the Sim JADO profile. You know, I remember the first time I did that, 45 degrees nose up, the plane just kept going. And I'm looking at the co-pilot, I'm like, are we going to push over at some point because it doesn't want to slow down? And so we're leveling off a solid 500 to 1,000 feet higher than the Legacy Herc did on the high performance climb. So little lessons learned there, but that was like my number one goal. Okay, logistics platform, make sure we're supporting the team. Demo was a nice to have. And then, so we finally got the funding for the center wing box, and then now we can manage the fleet in a smart way without overflying the center wing box we currently have in the aircraft. We'll be the first Marine C-130 to get a new center wing box, so we're kind of setting a trend there, because their aircraft are not getting any younger either, and they're going to have to find ways to keep those aircraft up and running. So kind of cool to see that Bert will be the first Marine Herc to do that and kind of set the trend. But I'm just happy that we're back in the show. Representing the Marine Corps and also supporting the team. I can go on with stories, but right now it's just, we're flying the Legacy profile just to get the demo up. I'm actually surprised we're flying a demo this year. You know, that's what being M1 is all about, is setting up the program for the future. It's not about you. And I just wanted to make sure I was passing a product to the next M1 to take it up and running. And you know, that's part of the job as M1. You're planting a tree you'll never stand in the shade of, and that's what the job is all about. So, very surprised, and I'm very happy that we're flying in the demonstration this weekend for the end of season. So it means a lot for the 75th new Super Hercules and the Super Hornet flying together. It's awesome. I'll pass it over to Mo.
Hello, everyone. Lieutenant Brian Abe, maintenance officer. Well, I just can't believe we're here in the 7th anniversary of the transition for 2 different TMS series. I still remember looking at what the transition team had worked for us to get us set up, and looking at the spreadsheet and going to boss, and he asking us, are we ready? Can we transition to the Super Hornet? Do we have enough assets? Do we feel that in November, drop a salute, we will be able to have 6 aircraft ready to go, ready to fly? And luckily for us, we had Boss Doyle, who really pushed through and got us set up for success, along with Garrett Hopkins and the maintenance team there. So I was able to tell Boss, yes, sir, we are ready to go. We can transition to the Super Hornet. And in fact, so we did. We had a 12 legacy divestiture that we had to get rid of. So this last year and in 2020, we got rid of all of our F-18 legacy Hornets and accepted 11 new Super Hornets. So we had definitely a busy year. And to answer real quick what Admiral was saying about our transition team, in 2020, we were able to hire 15 fleet F-18 maintainers across the board for all the different platforms. So we were able to have our 50% of what we needed, along with 2 Super Hornets, to be able to do our start of our transition for our maintenance inspection in 2020, in August 2020. So that really set us up. We are able to, obviously, the Super Hornet, it's the premier Navy fighter platform. So we're able to source from there. So this year, all of our hires have been F-18 Super Hornet qualified people, which has been very nice. We still get a couple of H-60s and P-8s people coming in, but still, the majority of the people we have are Super Hornets, and we have a very good, rigorous training process to get everyone else up and running who are not Super Hornet qualified. And then we're still lucky enough to be able to recruit from the Marine Corps, so we're still getting some solid Marine Corps F-18 mechanics, which is awesome to have. And then this is the first year we actually are able to stand up fully a BERT C-130 maintenance department. Before we got here, it was FEs that were running the shop. So over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been able to increase what we need to actually fly and maintain the C-130. So we have 9 qualified Marines that will be coming in over the next year. And then hopefully we'll get our funding for our tools, and then we'll be able to really, really maintain the aircraft when we get that. I can definitely tell you, I love F-18s, but BERT was definitely a passion project for myself and M1. We wanted to make sure that, one, logistics, we had it set up because I never knew how important a Bert was until getting into this season and being able to go to Turbo and go to 5 and say, hey, we need to send Bert to go get this. And he dropped the hat. This is what we're supposed to do, and they go get it. So to be able to have the Super Hercules here with us today is awesome. And then getting to the demo, that was one thing, again, I didn't think we were going to get to. A lot of long conversations with the PMA 207, working with the engineers and getting everything we needed to do to get the actual data that we need to capture to be able to go to Boss and Sinatra and say, yes, sir, we can fly this aircraft safely. We have a target goal of November 2025 to fly this aircraft to before we go in and change the center wing box like Boss alluded to. And when we change out that center wing box, it's a titanium center wing box. It'll give us another 70,000 hours on this aircraft. So we will definitely have to change some wings and some other surfaces before we have to have this Bert. So I'm looking forward to coming back in 10, 15 years and seeing that same Buno being able to fly. Probably, hopefully the same paint job, because it is a good paint job. Some of the things for the maintenance perspective this year, again, we had the best maintainers in the fleet, so that I was not worried about. They know what they're doing day in, day out. We have the most talented men and women the Navy and Marine Corps has to offer. The things we didn't know are the little Super Hornetisms that flying it the first time for the Blue Angels. So one of the first things was ladder cautions out in El Centro. That was one that we would go flying and they would take off, and they would just have the way that we were, the Legacy Hornets, we were just going to be able to pull down the ladder and just throw it up and slap it up and go for the crew chiefs. Well, we had to improve our process and say, no, this is not the right way. So we had to slow down, take our time. So if you watch the ground show, the crew chiefs, it may take a little extra 30 seconds to be able to get that ladder seated correctly. We even had where dudes came back and his ladder was fully extended and came in for a landing. So that was one that we had to go back through and realize we need to beef up some of the formers and we need to change some parts. So knock on wood, we've got that problem fixed. The next and probably the biggest one that we had to face this year was the fuel that we used. We, in the Super Hornet, we have to have a certain type of fuel, either JP5, JP8, F24, or we have to have this additive. When we go to most civilian sites, it's just Jet A. So it's just a normal gas that any other plane could use, but we need a little extra lubricity to it. With the Legacy Hornet, the bin system was oil, so they would always be lubricated by oil. Well, the Super Hornet, it's not that case. It's lubricated by the fuel. So I remember in Florida, back up in Corpus Christi, we had a little bit of a rainstorm. We didn't get to fly too much. And we had Jet A in there, and we originally were told that we'd go 10 flight hours with Jet A, and then you have to flush it out with a little mixture of JP5, we'd be good to go. Well, that's not really the case. What we found out when we started to have some issues with the fuel systems and the bin locking out to where it was becoming a safety issue for the pilots. And we went back and worked with Navy fuel systems and the engineers to say, okay, this is what you need. So we incorporated with our mechanics, it's a CILI lubricity additive that we'll go in and we personally mix ourselves. So we'll get to the air show site, and in a 5,000 gallon fuel truck, you're only adding milliliters, but it is enough of a difference to make sure that it is provide that lubricity to the engines to make sure that we continue to fly the safe aircraft. One of the things we had was the landing gear. We realized that was slow to retract, so we had probably about a good 2 months of troubleshooting with that, and our airframers got out there and they figured out there was a problem that we needed the two filters that were coming delivered to us, that the filters were swapped. So we fixed that problem and we keep on moving on. And probably the last one that any Super Hornet you're dealing with is going to be the fuel cell. We've had these jets, they're the oldest Super Hornets we have in the fleet. They're the Lot 21, Lot 22 LRIP jets that were sitting on stilts someplace, not being preserved very well. So now we're getting them and we're flying them, and now we're having to deal with some fuel cells. We've gone through about 30 fuel cells between all the different tanks and the vent tanks that we've had to change out right now. So luckily, we have had a great partner with the Boeing's field team and the FRC artisans. They've come out and they've really helped us out a lot for everything. And one thing that we're going to try to carry on and fix in 2022, if you'll see it, on some of the jets that we have, again, kind of back to what I was saying before, these jets are all different. And we have a couple jets, especially his jet 536, it has a venting issue where whenever they go and they do a quick inverted or certain different maneuvers, it starts venting fuel out the back. Well, we're coming to find out is not every jet has these certain TDs that are incorporated, so we're going back through we're going to try to figure out and piece together, okay, why is this jet doing this when it is just one BNO number different? So that's kind of what we're trying to piece together, and we're going to work with 6 or soon to be 5 this year during winter training to try to figure out that flight characteristics and see what we need to do to change out. But overall, I can definitely tell you that it's been great working with these new jets. They're much more reliable on the maintenance side of the house. It's been very nice. We are having to deal with now working with Big Navy to be able to get parts that we need, because obviously we're not going to take away from the warfighter. And probably the most struggle we're going to have right now is we have very lot specific aircraft. So these first rounds of Super Hornets, there's only 5 built for this specific kind. So now we're having to go out and we're having to source and make some new hard lines for our hydraulic lines and everything else. So it's been a challenge, but we've had a lot of support going through. So looking forward to 2022 and see what we can do from there.
Well, this is pretty cool. We've already jungled.
Well, I got two more comments here, and I'll turn it over to the crowd here. So I think these guys are way too humble. I think one of the things that is the most important part of this transition that we haven't focused on enough is the folks sitting up here. And there were folks when we went into this season after the pandemic, when we went into this transition, we had some issues, right? We have a lack of experience in the team. We've already frozen the team member. We already had a solo pilot who's been on the team for 4 years, and now we have this new aircraft that we're going to throw into the mix. And everyone's, like you said, a different aircraft. They're all one-offs. They're LRIP aircraft, and we're trying to figure this. And you have to have the right team. So right off the bat, I asked them to everyone who didn't have severe career implications, will you stay here one more year? Everybody raised their hand and said yes. And there's certainly risks, the career management difficulties that go along with that. So I'm going to give a shout out to PERS. Huge help in this entire process. All the folks up at PERS 43 allowing us to get this. We had a guy who was a sitting air boss on the Truman who was about to retire, already set to retire this March, I think. And I think I gave a call early in the morning, and it was something like the fact is, he said, I think you're standing in the hangar bay too, and like, hey, I need a solo pilot for a year. And like any self-respecting Blue Angel, says, sure, absolutely. You need to talk to Missy? And he's like, I probably should do that. Let me get back to you. So no kidding, did that. Should be retired. Extended on here, came down to do this. On top of that, we had Chewy coming here. I won't go into details, but Chewy goes med down literally a week prior to our first show. And flights like hell, we get back up mid-season, and we get him back up. On top of that, our transition team member, a Diamond pilot, by the way, came back in, and we went solo profile in a couple months, and filled in. So Lance Benson came in and filled in. Certainly, we as some of the bosses know, and put out some information to you. This is in the solos. A lot of X's were confided in before we did that, and we had the right guy to train him. We had 2 guys out there as training wheels to make sure that we could put on a 6-plane demo until Chewy was up and running again. And we were able to get Chewy back in, have Bub support Lance Benson, and get back to a normal flow because of what these guys accomplished right here. No doubt about it. We talk about the logistics side. You want to talk about pain? Look down in our Burt shop for the last couple of years, right? Take a bunch of aviators and put them in a room and say, you don't have a plane, and we don't know when we're going to get it because COVID's happening. And it just keeps perennially sliding. No, we can't go over there yet. We can't pick it up. We can't pick it up. We can't pick it up. We're a year behind timeline. We get here, the engineers say, well, you could demo it, but you can fly for about a year and a half if you demo it, based upon our calculations. All right. And one thing I need to correct for us, it is a Navy plane. The Marine Corps didn't buy this for us. The Navy bought the C-130 with the Marine Corps support. But the Marine Corps supported the bodies, which we all know is more, in some ways, tougher to get. But they ponied up more bodies to maintain Burt. And there was a lot of work that went into that, a lot of pain. He's in extra pain as we're going through this transition. So a couple things I wanted to talk on the boss profiles. These guys can get into technical things. But I think that one of the things you'll notice about the flight characteristics, probably for the novice like myself in the room, is a loop. Just doing a simple loop. We go out and do loop-de-loops in the Blue Angels. And we normally in the Blue Angels, we go up, we take in the Hornet, we go up, we take rip our throttle pretty much close to idle, we put our boards out full out, or half out, depending on what we were doing. We'd come back down, kind of glide down and decel. Throughout the entire process, we found that doesn't work in the Super Hornet. Now, if I tell a Hornet boss who's never heard anything what we're doing right now, they'd probably come up and say, "You're crazy, you should be fired." But right now, no kidding, we now no longer, we go up with an aircraft that has way more thrust, way more engine response, a lot more finicky, but more consistent on the engine response. We go up on the top of our loop, rip it back. We don't put our boards out. In fact, when we approach bullseye nose low, I do a call that was similar for some of the old bosses in the room with a float call. So as we approach bullseye nose low, because of the way the flight characteristics and the feedback loop to alpha to G, we had to figure out, and these guys trusted me, and as we're trying to figure this out, like, boss, I think you need to ease the stick forward, because we're leveling off really high, and it just bites and levels off, like 1,500 feet. It would just bite, and the alpha would just build, and you'd have to put way forward stick to try to control it, and you can't. So as we now approach bullseye nose low, you're going, a little ease comes the pull. So it's a little ease comes the pull to control the alpha build rate. We're not actually trying to float in mortise on the ground, but it sure felt like that the first couple times we tried that. And I'm sure Baxter's like, what did I sign up for? As we're doing line press loop, right? Like, this is fun. So there's something like that. Also, some of the data points that we fly, the solos again are too humble and too understated, but there's some stuff that just things like, we didn't test it to do that. We didn't test formation flight inverted with another aircraft in close proximity to each other when you bought this thing, so good luck. Right, so what they did for us up in Pax River is they injected their own flight control software, 20 echoes, what they call it, doesn't matter. They put a spring in there, they put actual flight control computers, our transition team, Boss Doyle, Walleye, Daryl Mullins, Bubba Benson, and our solos went up there and really ground out a little bit and figured out what this jet was doing and where the safety corners of the envelope were for us. One just kind of caveat, that I'll throw out there is our double farvel push out. So now what we do in our double farvel, flip over, and our push out is a negative 1.3 to 1.4 push out. So a little push, and I push out at negative 1.3 to 1.4. And in a Hornet, all you do is go ready, break, and you pull back and you do that and reset the stick and stop. Like you go up to 5 degrees and you just stop, and throw you in your straps and you're good to go. First time I was going to try that, I talked to Boss Doyle and he's like, well, you might have to put a lot more forward stick than you're used to in the Super. I'm like, oh, okay. So I came back, and the first time I, wide-eyed, I come back and Tootsie, like, I hit the forward stop, and it didn't stop until I was a couple degrees nose low. And then, sure enough, Tootsie's like, that doesn't sound right. I talked to the Boss Doyle, and he's like, yeah, I did that a couple times too. So talked to Sting Wallace, and he's like, turns out we didn't have test points to do inverted negative G push-outs and breakouts in the Super. And that probably goes to every maneuver that the solos do as well. So on top of that, it's a big plane. The old shiny brochure, it's 33% bigger. We got bigger engines. We do a lot more thrust response. So we're way back in the power, especially on low DA days. We're going up on loops on a fleur-de-lis at 84%, 83%. Really low days, even lower than that, which is really low. And adding power on the up. And it's a fantastic aircraft nonetheless, but it pushes itself. We push ourselves around a lot more. I think when we found the Diamond, the Delta formations, a lot of wings. We have a lot of roll authority, but these guys push on me a lot more. I think compared to the Hornet. So I don't know. There's certainly other platforms that pushed on each other a lot, but this one, at least the magnitude of the push seems to be a little bit more. It's a bigger aircraft, makes sense. But with that, Admiral, back to you.
Is that awesome? Really? Thanks, guys. How we doing that time? First thing I'm sitting here, I'm looking around and say, Jungle and JJ, all the A4 solo pilots, we can help you with a low transition to gear. You just take off at 92% power. Isn't that what it was, Jungle? So it's not a problem. It works. Long roll, but it works great. One thing that maybe many people in the crowd don't remember or didn't even have visibility on is when you did not have Bert. XO, another thing, the validity of the XO billet that went in several years ago, these guys have absolutely validated how important having that in the command triad is. And I got a hats off to this guy for the work he has done, not only with them, but behind the scenes helping us support them in many ways that we never could have imagined before. So XO Todd, super guy. But there was a period of time when they did not have Bert. Can you imagine as a boss or Mo trying to put together trucking, literally contracting trucks to take your part support on the road? That's what this team went through. I mean, I don't even remember how long it went on now. Todd, was it like 18 months that they were putting that together? I mean, it was brutal amount of time it went into it, and now you're at a single point of failure. It just didn't work. So all the work that y'all have done, your priorities on the C-130, making sure the logistics and then moving in the show, I mean, you're spot on. The only other thing I want to make sure that really we address is that transition team that all of you alluded to. I mean, those guys, I don't know if you amplified, you just called them out. Those guys, what they did really, I think, again, helped pave the way. We got time for a couple of quick questions? Boss.
Super Hornet with a super spring? Still have the spring?
Yes, sir. Still have the spring. Same spring settings. They basically, all the stuff that you saw inside the aircraft is essentially the same. We have a block. It's just really nice. It's actually prefabricated versus somebody with a hacksaw and metal for the burner stops. It's a real pretty spring attachment now and all that. But all that stuff is still there. Same settings on there to the weight. Kind of 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds for it.
It's known as the Gilrude Memorial. It's the agricultural approach to aviation. And that's...
How many aircraft do you have? How many aircraft do you take on the road? How are the two seats completely compatible with the single seat airplanes? And could you, for those of us who never flew the Hornet, for those of us who never flew the Hornet, what's different about the show airplane than the fleet airplane? A lot of questions. If you can't remember those, I'll prompt you.
Mr. Boss, I'll tell you, we have 11 aircraft. We're getting more. We have, some of them we're doing a trade kind of swap thing, but we'll always have 2 Foxtrots. We're getting another Echo here in a month or 2 as well. We take 7 on the road. Long trips, we'll take 8 birds on the road for our shows. So that's where we're at. Different than the fleet. I mean, we have a different software load. All these aircraft, different computers. The biggest difference is the computer and the avionics and then the fleet bird. As far as the structure in there, that's where I can defer to Mo on the one-off nature of them. They're LRIP jets. So there's differences even from within our lots. LRIP and our Lot 22s, there's some unique differences. We saw those even with our A through Ds. Whether it's even avionics, but most of the plumbing, most of the flight control stuff, that's all the same. It's really the computers inside the jet that's the biggest difference outside of the Blue Angel modifications, which are relatively, I think, standard with a burner block for the certainly A4s, you can have a burner stop. We have a burner stop. Yes, sir. So a burner stop. One of the cool things the transition team was able to do is they were able to work with the flight engineers and figure out, now that we have FADEX or digital engine control units, that we have a block. It's still a metal plate that's right in front of my throttle, or throttles, where it kind of physically stops where I go. But now, because our FADEX, or my available thrust is based upon throttle handle angle, exactly. So now I'm just putting an input. It's all fly-by-wire on my throttles as well. Those burner blocks equate to an exact decrease in thrust. As we're in a Hornet, it was a kind of a Kentucky windage on there. So what we have is we know exactly how much thrust that we're going to have at a particular burner stop. And because of that, they're able to make up charts and equate a burner stop to a density altitude. So when we were up in Loveland, when we saw up there, sir, we had our burner stops there. We made a call on which burner stop we wanted to use based upon our excess thrust that we wanted available, based upon the wingman's ability to stay with me. Now, not as tough for me because I could just go take it up to a power setting, and all the way to the stop, as we guys had to. A4 guys and all the other guys, non-afterburners, had to actually stop the throttle yourself at a RPM. But that's what we have there. The springs, same as it was in the Hornet, just a spring with forward pressure on the.
Flew the Hornet with a spring.
Well, it's a poor man's way of rolling the field, I guess. What we had was we no kidding, instead of rolling the trim forward on it, we no kidding attach a spring to the base of the stick that it just gives us something to brace against versus rolling the trim forward.
Okay.
And so now I'll defer to these other guys.
Did I miss? Did you explain if the 2-seat is the same as a single seat?
Well, I don't fly the 2-seat one, but they're pretty close. They're about 1,000 pounds less on gas, but I'll hand it over to Tootsie here. He's got some of the flight characteristic differences because he sees it the most in the Diamond as a comparison.
Yes, sir, boss. To answer your question, is the 2-seat the same as the single seat? And pretty much yes. The jets fly very similar. As Baxter was alluded to earlier, the specific bureau numbers tend to handle a little bit differently. We've got a couple airplanes. One of our 2-seaters just rolls really different on the back half of the roll, so we've had to manage that throughout the year. The biggest thing with the 2-seat aircraft from a selfish perspective is just the noise inside when you're with people in there. The settings with the ICS and the voice activated ICS system or Vox makes it pretty challenging to hear sometimes. So we've had to work this year with some of the Gibbs and Barn folks and some of the engineers up at Pax River to try and get an active noise reduction helmet system that essentially works as a Bose noise canceling system there to suppress all of the ambient noise outside. We didn't really have the time or bandwidth to work on that at the tail end of this year, so they're going to continue to work on that as they go into 2022. And then the other thing too is from a Diamond perspective, flying in the 2-seat jet, the canopy itself is so much bigger. So from boss all the way through 3, whoever happens to be flying the 2-seat jet, you get a lot more of a bow wave push or a push from the jet, specifically in the Diamond 360 or in the fan brake or the echelon parade maneuver, where we're flying in some of our tighter sets. I know when Deuce is flying the 2-seater, boss will come back in the debrief and be a little wing wrap up, and he really has to fight harder to hold off the wingman's bow wave push because of the little bit larger canopy there. So. But as it had been mentioned before, a Hornet's a Hornet, and just from an aesthetic standpoint, you stand in it flies pretty much the same, minus the small differences.
Okay. I think I had one other question I need to ask. How many maintenance people do you take on the road?
Yes, boss. So we simply still stick with what we can fit on bird. So right now it's our 49 people that we fit on for our maintainers, plus the ComCart crew and support officers. And then we have our 7 geek that's already there. So roughly about 50 people. For the long shows, when we do take 8 jets, we'll use a Navy NALO system, and we'll use Bert also to get our body out there. We'll usually take about 60 people, sir.
And total number that you have on the team?
Right now on the team, we have roughly about 90 maintainers.
Thanks.
Boss, to round out your last part of the question about differences in a Blue Angel Hornet versus a Fleet Super Hornet, the last 2 pieces of the puzzle there are the inverted fuel pumps are the only other internal piece added to the jet, and then the smoke tank, which is another little piece of the puzzle the engineers found where in the Super Hornet versus the Hornet, the center of gravity is further aft in the Super Hornet. It is inherently more unstable aerodynamically. So removing the gun and putting in the smoke tank was a bigger risk or bigger change in center of gravity to the Hornet because now the nose is very light. So that is another thing we see. If we're low on fuel, we'll get a very, very light nose on touchdown due to the center of gravity slowly shifting aft as we're burning all that fuel. So that was kind of the last engineering puzzle they found.
That's all I know.
I personally was very glad to see him get the inverted fuel pumps. We really do have to wrap this up. I apologize.